In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to draw a simple lattice knot. This is just practice, so use whatever pen or pencil and paper you have on hand. I'll be using a very blunt-tipped marker so you can see clearly. The first step in drawing a knot is to lay out a square grid of dots. It doesn't have to be perfectly square, so I often just draw them freehand, like this. Later on in this class, I'll show you how to use a ruler or some graph paper to do a more precise layout. This grid can be any size you want, but I think 5 by 6 is a good size for your first knot. The next step is to draw a line around the outside of your grid. Try to draw just outside the dots so you can still see them. Now go back through your grid and put a dot in the center of every square. Notice that now you have a grid of smaller squares oriented on the diagonal to the original squares you drew. These smaller squares are going to be the unit squares that you use to draw the knot, so when I refer to squares in the rest of this class, I'll be talking about these smaller squares. You don't need to shade them in with pencil. I'm just doing that to show you what I'm talking about. Though if you're having trouble visualizing these squares, you could try coloring them in like this if you think that would help. I'd also like to point out that there are these triangular spaces around the outside edges of your knot, and you're going to treat these differently than the square spaces. Again, you don't have to color them in, but you can if you'd like. Now it's time for the exciting part, actually drawing the knot. I find it helps to think of the dots as pins or pegs that stick up out of the paper, and the knot itself is a three-dimensional piece of string that I'm physically weaving around the dots. In this example, if you follow the path of the yellow string, you can see that you always weave the string over one, under one, over one, under one, and so on. To start, pick a square and draw two parallel lines across it like this. That's the first piece of string. Try to keep it centered in the square, and try to keep the width of the string about half the width of the square. Now imagine following the path of the string down and to the right. It just went over, so in the next square that I have shaded with pencil, it's got to go under. Then in the next square, it goes over again. Now just keep going across the page, following the path of the string. When you get to the triangular space by the border, leave that blank for now. Now you can pick up the paths of the other strings that run perpendicular to that first string, and just keep following the pattern of over, under, over, under. Try to keep the width of the string fairly consistent, and try to keep the paths of the strings flowing smoothly across the page. Don't worry too much about perfection though. These knots are visually quite busy, so once you've finished, most inconsistencies or mistakes will be much less noticeable. Also, I think the variation you get from hand drawing really gives the finished piece life. There's one common mistake that I want to address right away because beginners often make it, and that is to just connect the dots. If you do this, you'll just end up with some hand-drawn graph paper. You really need that negative space to make it actually look like a woven lattice. Now I'm going to show you how to deal with the triangular spaces around the border walls of your knot. It's pretty simple. Every time a string is about to run into a wall, it makes a 90-degree turn. So take a second to make sure you understand the path the string is following, and then draw a smooth connection. Then you can work your way around the knot, drawing these connections. corners actually follow the exact same rule as the walls. The string hits one wall and makes a 90-degree turn, and then immediately runs into another wall and has to turn another 90 degrees, so 180 degrees total. I almost always draw them pointed like this, but you can make them rounded if you'd like. When you've finished all the corners, congrats! You've drawn your first knot. To really make it pop, color in the background. Then take a picture and share it in the class projects.